Zen meditation, poetry, composition, sustainability, and love of color and beauty. How can you weave all those together? My guest today, Eleanor Graves, has found a way to honor and share all of those gifts. Her journey has included living in a monastery, teaching yoga, writing poetry, and today, running a successful interior design business. I'm so excited to introduce her, so let's get started. Welcome to the Youthful Older Yogi podcast. I'm MJ Waddell, your yogi host and founder of Share Yoga. I've been practicing, teaching, and loving yoga for over 25 years. I'm an advocate of movement, creativity, and staying healthy in mind and body after 50. And so are my guests. It's never too late to start, and there's a lot of healthy years ahead. So let's start now. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Youthful Older Yogi. I'm MJ Waddell, creator of Share Yoga and this podcast. I'm very grateful and excited that you're with me today. I have an amazing guest, Eleanor Graves, and she's one of these superhuman people that really made a lasting impression on me 18 years ago. We met at our 200-hour teacher training for yoga in Washington, D.C., and I remember just being mesmerized by her story. She had lived in a monastery. She is a poet. And of course, she loved the yoga practice. So that's where we connected most. So fast forward 18 years later, I've reconnected with Eleanor, and she's been so gracious to appear on the Youthful Older Yogi. And I can't wait for you to hear her interesting journey. So welcome, Eleanor. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm overjoyed to be here, and thank you for that amazing introduction.
All true. So I want to get right to it because I always thought this was amazing and so fascinating about your journey, that you lived in a monastery, I think for 4 years, and then the 5th year you went to a different retreat center. So can you share with our listeners exactly how you came to make that decision? Because it is a big decision to move and live in a monastery.
Yeah, it didn't feel, first I'll just say, I was in my 20s, and it didn't feel like a big decision in the sense of like, am I going to get married? Am I going to have kids? Because of being pretty young. It was a time in my life where I was definitely in a more exploratory mode. And I learned about meditating. I learned about sitting zazen, and I landed in a place, happened to be in Europe at the time, and I landed in a place that showed me that, actually this could be a lifestyle. You could live in a monastery and sometimes a retreat center. The place I was in was actually a retreat center in Austria. And you could, live on the schedule, work in exchange for the opportunity to practice, and they would provide you room and board as well. So I plugged into this place in Austria for a while, and it just felt really natural. Maybe it's a little like summer camp for spiritual seekers, something like that. It's not that you always you get to macrame in the afternoon. It's not like that, but at the same time, who's gonna make the lunch today? I'll make the lunch, And then there's something also about the structure of Zen Buddhism that I know for some people it's like the main turnoff, but for me it was the main turn on. I was just really helped by the armature that it provided for me at a time in my life where I was, I call it, now I can see that I was really searching, but I was so what's the word? My older monastery mates called me angsty, but I didn't like being called angsty, but I think I might have been angsty. So it was a time where I was probably pretty frustrated about my prospects in the world and angry. And then, this gave me some space and time to just sit down and learn the skill of being with my discomfort and concentrating my mind and doing a wholesome thing in my life, which I hadn't really, done so much. I think I think I've said this before with you, and I always like to include it. Like, I was underneath it all really miserable. I was, really really casting around. I was always really creative and I wanted a creative career and coming of age in the 80s and the 90s, and looking around and just seeing like not any options for someone like me. And what was I going to do? What was the compromise I would have to make? And in some way, this was a detour, but it also felt like such a cool, amazing, healing prospect that it was maybe more important than the creativity piece. And then I also would tell myself while I was in the monastery, but like I can still do that while I'm here, right? And that was mixed results, but yeah, that's how I got there. It's my
I think it's
short
really
story.
interesting that you said it didn't really feel like a major decision. And I'm thinking back to my 20s where, moved to New York or did whatever. You're right. It didn't seem like a big decision. I guess if today I was making those decisions, I'd be like, what the hell? Hang
Oh
on.
yeah.
Right? You'd kind of look for everything that could go wrong instead of the way you faced it or acknowledged it was like, what can, it's probably going to be a good thing. So, I find that so interesting that you said it wasn't really a big major decision. And that's so, I guess thinking back to my earlier decision making, it didn't seem, but so many people say, oh, that's such a big major decision. Are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I'm sure. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, youth is great for that. And it is such a funny thing too. Like it probably it probably would be impossible for me to go back to the monastery now. I don't want to say it is absolutely, but also now I know how hard it is. Like at the time I was sort of ignorant about it, and it kicked my ass, but it was also, and I think I had no idea the real value in it, and when I meet people now, they automatically, especially a mature person and a practitioner like yourself, you could see there's value there. And I think at the time I was like, I just feel like I need to do this, and it's not going to hurt anyone. I'm not abandoning any kids. My parents did not love the idea, but it's like they were tolerant enough. So yeah,
I
yeah.
love it. That's great. I always feel that our lived experience and our environments always contribute to some of our decision making.
Mm.
And so, did anyone influence your attitudes or your choices towards the experience of meditation or spirituality? I mean, you said you were in, was it Austria? Austria?
Austria, yeah.
Austria. And how did finding that meditation, the sitting practice, and the spirituality, did something influence you, someone or something influenced you to move in that direction?
Well, I lucked into meeting a man who was also an artist, and I was living in New Mexico at the time, and he was a local. He lived in this town in New Mexico, and he was charismatic and friendly, and I was new, and I just sort of went to him a lot because in fact I saw him in a cafe, I'd just go sit down with him, and eventually like I figured out where he lived, and so I would go to his house and be like, "Hi, I'm here." Like, what should we do? And he would be like, I'm busy. But one time he was like, he would let me come in and we drink tea and talk, and he would tell me about he was a Zen practitioner and he meditated, and he told me, one time you might come over here and I won't answer the door and I don't want you to be offended. I'm sitting, and if you want, I'd be happy to show you how to sit. And that man, his name was Tom Mayer. I mean, that was such a generous thing to do. It seemed like also so simple, but it is sometimes those like little things, you do little gesture for someone and it can really just like change the course of their life. And thereafter, he was like, I had no idea you would be so into it, but he did also acknowledge like I took to it, like it was like a fish in water. It was like, oh yeah, this is really right for me. And I just lucked out. Like I do feel like I'm just really lucky. So to have found it at that time in my life, yeah, really.
Amazing that those little snippets, you never know who you're going to influence or how. That's, yeah, I love that. It's serendipity. It's just you're the right place, right time, met the right person, and it guided you towards your practice. So, not long after you left that structured Zen Buddhist retreat center, how was it assimilating back into normal, quote unquote, normal life? Or was it something that we had talked about this previously where you're like, okay, I've done enough of this? What was it to then just go back into the chaotic outside world?
It was chaotic. Yeah. I did not really want to leave the monastery. And I think that was part of why it was a little bit harder. I mean, I remember being in the monastery and there was a young man there and he was sort of questioning why he was there. He was like, "Don't you miss like participating in the world of events?" And I don't remember like what he said specifically, but it was sort of like of this and that and the other thing. And I was like, "No, I don't miss
Yeah,
it."
right.
It, but so then being out, it was like a lot of my confirmation bias. Like I was a little intolerant of people like wanting to gossip. That was a tough one. Honestly, I learned living in community, we were 70 people at our maximum. We were often more like 60, 65. And when if you gossip about someone, it would come back to you that you'd been talking around their back, and you would hurt them. It would come back so fast. So people really were careful about their speech, and I learned not to gossip, and I learned that it's a really good thing not to gossip. And yeah, and then I came out of the monastery, and it's like I would make some friends, and it's like all this just like very casual chit chat that was not necessarily kind. And I mean, I have honestly like found my way to my people, and it's not, I think I'm more in circles where people are also very respectful now, but at the time it was like that, and also like a lot of alcohol. I was not used to that. And then dating was a nightmare. I was like, if someone seemed to like me, I'd go out with them. It was just like chaos. Yeah. I had
Yeah,
to learn boundaries. I didn't know these things.
that's amazing. Yeah. And now I think, oh my gosh, how nice it would be to escape the world, just to go over and just, considering the state of our globe these days, it is
Oh
pretty.
my God. Yeah. Yeah.
And did you in the retreat center, did you practice yoga?
Very, you know what? There was a lot of yoga happening in the summer times. When we would be in the winter, we were closed, we were cloistered, and there was no coming and going, and we were just a single body of residents or monastics practicing, and we would have a practice period schedule where we would meditate for most of the day and have a work period, meals interspersed, and a lecture and a study hall. Like these would all be part of our schedule. And in the summer, we would only meditate in the very early morning and after dinner, and then during the day we would work all day. And that was because we would have guest season is called, and they would come for things like Zen and yoga, Zen and cooking, Zen and poetry, anything in Zen. And it was a good time. It was hard also because it was like some of the chaos would seep into the monastery. But yeah, there was a lot of Zen and yoga, and we had some great yoga teachers. And so every now and again, they would invite some students, they'd put a sign-up sheet, like we can take 5 of the residents and you're, welcome to join one of the classes during the week. And so, I would sign up and I would get to do some yoga that way. And it was incredibly helpful because meditation postures are designed to be comfortable, but if you just sit in that same posture for 45 minutes, it's not comfortable pretty quickly. So it wasn't really until after the monastery that I really developed a regular yoga practice. But I definitely learned in the monastery, like this is necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what brought you to the 200-hour training that we met at. Was that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so I did a lot more yoga. As soon as I left the monastery, I became a regular yoga practitioner. And then I realized like this could be a helpful way to, this would be a helpful bridge for me. It would be like a way to, use the meditation and concentration skills and take care of my body and make some income. So yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
I know you taught for a while.
I
Did you
did.
did you
Yeah.
teach full time?
I was teaching full time. Yes, I'm a little foggy for how long. So after that yoga teacher training, I set myself up with a full-time yoga schedule.
Mhm.
I think I kept that up for about 5 years. That might be a little stretch. That's a hard thing to do on your body, as we
Yeah.
have talked about. Yes.
Mhm. Yes, and for
Yeah.
those of you that think teaching yoga full time would be like the best job ever, think again because we can both sit here and tell you I taught full time for 5 years and I had to do other jobs just because you don't make that much money unless you're doing privates, but it's a very giving. You have to give, 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 and you don't really have, from my experience, you don't really have the balance of receiving or giving to yourself because you're always planning a class, traveling to and from a class. And so, try it for a little bit, but just take a word from the wise because we've lived it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, really could go on. There's so many, yeah, it's funny when you mentioned traveling, like that was the thing I did not expect is how much time it takes traveling from class to class. And then if you do the opposite, which is you're just locked into a studio system, that's a really hard way because you don't get enough classes and they don't pay very well.
Correct.
So, yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I actually did 5 years. I think it was less. I'm thinking back, like, because I
Fell into
remember
5 years, right?
5 years would be really hard. I think I ended up doing less. But I kept teaching. I had some good plan, and maybe you do this too. Like I had some well-paying clients, some well-paying classes. Like I had a law firm, and that was such a great client. And I hung on to them for probably 10 years because yeah, they made it worth my time, and they were delightful, you know.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that's always, right now, I only teach 2 classes a week, which is perfect for me. I do some online, but it allows me to have my own practice, which that's the time I cherish the most is when I do my own practice. So I become very selfish with it. It's like, that's mine. This is mine. Nobody can have it. So,
But that's right.
and so moving past the yoga, you've had so many different careers and you've had this collegiate history that is expansive in my opinion. So in design and literature, composition, poetry, and being such an artistic, creative soul that you are, how have you been able, or have you been able to narrow it down to something particular?
I mean, now I work full time as an interior designer, but you're asking me a question that I like this question. It's a good question, but it does haunt me because, I actually remember when I was just starting out as a Zen practitioner and I would go up to this Zendo and I would sit for a couple periods or I'd do a day long, like a mini retreat with some people. And there was a writer who would appear once in a while. And I think she ended up writing about this in a book, but she told us about a teacher of hers who told her, you can either be a really dedicated Zen student or you can be a writer. But and there was no like why that is. That's not what the Zen teacher does. And then she decided, well, it's going to have to be writing. And I am still like not willing to narrow my options, niche down. It's like I still have a writing practice. I mean, I had to let go of the writing practice for a long time as I became an interior designer. And then I remembered, like, I think of myself as a writer, and that's part of me that is still, wanting to express itself. So I've created a part of the week. I have a Friday afternoons designated as writing time. And, it feels like it's really minimal, but at the same time, I've managed to do quite a lot of writing over, I've been doing that for about a year. Maybe it's been almost a year where I've been able to just take Friday afternoons and not do other work. It's funny. It doesn't seem like all that much time, but when I'm working during Monday through Friday morning, I'm like, oh, I could really use that Friday afternoon to do this other work. And then when I'm doing the writing on Friday afternoon, I'm like, I don't even know what I have to say, And then I managed to write a book. I actually have a whole book. So somehow it's weird. and it works.
No, I understand because I have different passions. Theater's one of my passions, yoga. I love to teach. I teach theater, I teach CPR, I teach yoga. There's lots of, and I've started to write also. I just started with writing a blog. But,
Nice.
and it's given me, it's almost like my therapy that I write because it's actually my expression on paper. So it's kind of like my little, well, I call my Matt Dr. Matt. It's like my therapy. I'm like, hello, doctor. I'm stepping down to you now. And are you ready? What do you got for me today? But even pen and paper, there's something about that practice that it just really helps for expression instead of keeping everything so closed up. So many people and have courage behind the keyboard, right? But when you actually put it out there in a blog or a book or whatever, it's really, I think it's an act of courage. So I'm glad you're finding your writing, and that's so great. And you're not niching down, just saying I have to be this or that, right? So I
Yeah,
don't.
thanks for saying that. I mean, I think that, yeah, I think you and I are very similar in that way. And I remember too, finding out about your theater career and being kind of mesmerized and drawn, like how do you do that? And how did that happen? And give me something.
Yes, and
Yeah.
we talked about this, and so I'm please share with people what you have participated in. So I just love this because this was a big, fantastic surprise. So share with our listeners what you do now. Is it maybe weekly or monthly?
Yes, okay, yes. So I know, and I have a little gurgle in my heart right now. I started doing comedy improv. Yay! It is a talk about brave things to do. But yeah, I just love it, and I never really thought of myself as a theater person, so it's interesting to also remember meeting you the first time and how there's something in me that was like, it's like I'm a Leo. Every now and again I'm wondering if it's like, is that the Leo in me that's just like must be limelight, must be limelight, center of attention me. Yeah, so it's such a great thing to do weekly. And I had practice last night with my team, and I was like, you guys, I need something like somatic. I need something physical. Like, I don't know if you can we just do something in our bodies? I really was feeling that. And my teammates are not like that's not automatic for them, but they're figuring out that like this is who I am. So
I just love it that you're doing comedy. And so improvisation for our listeners is you don't have a script. It's all you have to the main rule is you have to say yes and to any idea, to any thought. And there's no script, nothing. It's just you and your willingness to say yes and. So I love that you're doing that. I'm like so excited that you're doing that. Everybody should do it. It really helps, like it helps in your life. It's being completely present in the moment, which also
yeah.
yoga teaches us that too. So
Yeah, this is like the red thread connecting all these things. It's a concentration practice. It's a being present. It's being in your body. It's feeling what you're feeling. Yeah.
that's why I think I like doing yoga and theater. It's so similar to me. I
Mm.
wanted to pop in to thank you for listening to the Youthful Older Yogi. It's season 2, and I'm so excited to bring you more great guests, education, and ways for you to stay youthful in mind and body after 50. If you love the show and want to help me make it even better, please consider becoming a supporter. You get to choose how much and how often you give, and there's no commitment. And remember, I donate a portion of every dollar I receive to charity. For 2024, I've chosen UNICEF. Just click the support button in the show notes. And just as helpful is sharing the show with other youthful older yogis. Thank you again so much for listening. And now let's get back to the podcast. So with your meditation practice, that was so much in the forefront when you started out in your early 20s. And then did you feel your teacher training yoga gave you the additional tools, not only to teach, but also to move out into the world with the yoga principles and tools?
Yeah, it's exactly that. And there's so much, like I mentioned earlier, like I'm a person who needs structure, and there was so much of that that came through. Everything from, how to sequence poses. I mean, how to break down a pose, how to teach a pose, how to modify a pose, how to sequence the pose, like all of that information. On some level, I had learned it for my own body, but how to communicate that so that it's safe for other bodies was so incredibly helpful. But it was also really neat to meet James Brown, who was talking about also just like what it is to work in the industry. And you know, there's some things in there that I still remember, just like how it takes time to build up a class, and then if you take a break and you don't teach that class for a while, that class goes away and you have to start over. Yeah.
It is. It's not an easy business, nor is theater, nor is writing, nor is interior design.
Yeah.
So, these creative endeavors, I think for anyone that's a creative, it's not the easiest path, but it's the most, for me, fulfilling when things work out the way they're supposed to work out. So, and currently you are the owner and creator of Refuge Design. So you help people design their home spaces with colors and styles and aesthetics. And what is the most rewarding part of that of your interior design job for you?
Well, I really love it's like becoming a kind of a coach for people in their homes. I mean, this is a little funny to say, but I love beauty. I really love like the aesthetic components, like finding colors that work together, and then how it looks with some wood flooring and how that works with some textile, like, and finding a combination, where it didn't exist before and how it's going to work in this particular home. Like that is a very satisfying process. And I'm just basically describing, creativity is like you create something, but then it's visually beautiful. It just makes your eyes happy and your eyes, your whole body. I think that's a big one. And doing that in relationship to homeowners, where they come to me because they don't know how to do this, and they're like over the years I've come to really embrace this piece of it, which is like this emotional level where they're feeling stuff about their home and their ability to make it nice, and also their ability to take care of it. There's just so much we don't know about taking care of these structures. And so, coming in and being enthusiastic and showing them what they're already doing right, and then using their ideas, incorporating the colors that they like, and, just collaborating with them. You can see them just, they get more confident, and they start to get really excited and they feel relieved. But it's just the best. That is the most rewarding part for sure. Then when it works, and there's a lot of times where it doesn't really, for various reasons, often because if it's a couple and they don't agree, that's a main one. They have different design goals, then often the project will just stall out. But that is by far the most rewarding part. Yes.
I love it. And I love that you said I like to look at beautiful things. It can be very
Yeah.
overwhelming. I'm in the process of moving. I live in a very small studio apartment and I'm moving into a one bedroom apartment, and my landlord said I could do whatever I want. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like like and then I'm like, oh, I can do whatever I want. And then I just freeze. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do. But and I've lived in a home before with a partner, and renovated, and it can be very, very, really, I just said do whatever you want. I don't care.
Yeah, those are the couples I like.
Yeah.
Those are the couples I like. Or individuals too. Yeah, I mean, it can be so overwhelming if this is new to you. It's a funny profession, to be honest, because a lot of time, I mean, we do work on interior decor, but we don't, a lot of people in interior design don't think of themselves as decorators. We think of ourselves as designers. And it has something to do with the fact that we're not just working on the finishes, but we're also working on the mechanicals, the plumbing, the electrical, some of the structural stuff. And then the big thing is we're working on how to translate this to a contractor, and ensuring that this contractor is on board, will actually do what you want. When it all comes out, it's like, yeah, that's why the homeowner is anxious, because, they're going to bring someone into their home and something's going to happen. What's going to happen? They don't really know. And so they don't know how to make sure that the process goes well, but they also don't know how to tell the contractor what to do. And so there's a lot of things up in the air. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited, and we will have the links to Eleanor's website. It's really lovely. I've looked at your beautiful designs. Yeah, and if you live in you're in the Baltimore area, right?
I'm in Baltimore. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I can't wait for everyone to see your website. Also, you are a proclaimed color theory nerd. So
Right.
that's listed on your website. So please tell me, what does that mean, and what does the color someone chooses say about themselves?
Oh God, I love this question. It's like, I'm gonna show some discipline and not make it super long. There have been many color theories, and currently we're in a color theory phase that was started by Sir Isaac Newton. So he developed it actually for like scientific purposes, for lens crafting. And then so there's this whole side of color theory that I don't actually know some of that science stuff, so I won't go into that. But the other side of it is he created this color wheel, and it's basically a rainbow in a circle. And there's the amazing thing is that, I mean, he didn't know this, and he didn't actually develop this. It came later with this guy Joseph Munsell, but the colors, they have relationships to each other on this wheel. And so when you play with them in certain relationships, whether it's, red and green are opposite each other on the color wheel, and blue and orange and yellow and violet, when you play with those colors together, or you play with like red, orange, yellow, they create these different sort of vibes. Red and green is like Christmas, right? But those colors really pop. I mean, also like some of the sports teams, this is the color theory when you like start talking about it like this is like you can actually look for a lot of examples, and I'm having a hard time not having visual displays for you all. But like the Denver Broncos, right? Aren't their colors blue and orange? We're gonna
I
assume
only know the Buffalo Bills because I'm from Rochester. So the Buffalo Bills are like red and blue. I think it's red, white, and blue, actually.
red, white, and blue, patriotic.
Ah,
Technically not a color theory relationship, which I thought I like color, like primary colors, red, yellow, blue. That's Superman. That's so sometimes you see like cartoon bright, but when
uh-huh.
you get more subtle, which is a big part of learning about these color relationships and how you can mix colors, then you can start to find some color harmonies that are they're just so beautiful. There's a painter who does watercolors. His name was John Singer Sargent, if anyone wants to Google. He was really good with color, and you can kind of see how they're just looking at his paintings like, oh, there's something special there, like that would be something to get a visual indicator. Oh yeah, the question of like, what does it say about a person? Well, I have not had this client, but I did a color workshop once, and the woman was a huge Ravens fan, Ravens football team. So that's actually funny that I already brought the sports ref. But she was gonna go for the purple and gold as an interior color, and I was like, you do you. That's okay. And I was like, there's gonna be there's a very strong, bright purple. You could also go with something more muted that's still in the purple family, but it'll be more flexible. And she's like, no, thanks. And so there's something about her anyway that was like bold, forthright, clear, just like her colors. And then I think another example, there's always someone who's like, I hate color. Like I don't know what you're gonna do, but I hate color. And that's a funny thing for someone like me to hear because like it's all color. And so then the conversation I try to have is like, oh, so you would like less bold color palette, you would like, yes, I would like neutrals. Okay. Okay, so they want something more subdued. They just don't excite them too much.
Right? Yes. Yes. And then you have people like me that I don't know. It's like when you see something like I love ocean colors. I live by the ocean. I love all those ocean, the blues, the greens, all of that. And it's interesting, I follow my horoscope and things like that. I'm a Capricorn, so I'm a climber. I'm a stubborn goat. And so, but I'm like, I'm gonna make it to the top no matter what I do, right? but but I love the serenity of blue, of the blues and the oceans, and I guess sea, sky, and
Mm.
water, and all of that. So it's just I just love that you said you're a color theory nerd. I just wanted to touch on that, and thank you for explaining it. It's just fun stuff.
It is so fun. Please,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
no, let's talk about it another time. Keep going.
Okay, so speaking on your career and things, you mentioned earlier that, the gossip coming back into the world after living in a retreat center, the gossip. So,
Mm,
for those of you listening that don't practice yoga, yoga has principles. And there's also this principle of the Four Agreements, which is written by Don Miguel Ruiz. And it's about being impeccable with your word and things like that. And that's another part of yoga, is not just the asana, not just the poses and all of that, which most of the our Western world looks at, but it's the principles. And I love how you said the whole gossip thing. It's those are the principles that in yoga, it's almost like I feel the main principle of yoga is exactly like the golden rule: do unto
mm,
others as you
mm.
have done unto yourself. And that's really what I've started to love more about yoga now in my later years. But for you, did those principles from your living in the retreat center and practicing your sitting and all of those, and then practicing yoga and learning yoga, do they come into your career? Do they make your way into your career? Those principles?
Yeah, they do. We have there's so much overlap in yoga and Buddhism and how they emerged around the same time in India. But one of the things, it's like the golden rule, but one of our precepts is not precepts, but sort of pillars of of the Eightfold Path, which is, part of our how we conduct ourselves is having right livelihood. And right livelihood is like how we be of benefit. And teaching yoga is a beneficial career, but a beneficial work. And interior design potentially is not. And I've really had to look at how I wanted to position myself in the industry. And I've never really been interested in just serving anyone. I don't really want to serve an elite clientele. I want to serve people who are thinking about sustainability. I want to serve people who actually need some help with their home. And I've managed to attract those people. There's something about, I mean, it's very intentional what the services are that I put out and how I market my offerings is very much geared towards a certain audience and certain client base. And it does mean some less income. You work for the rich people, you get bigger projects and you get more money, but it's not always the case. I don't mean to generalize, but there can be a lot more waste and a lot more like just unnecessary upgrades or habitually upgrading when it's just not necessary. And that just did not feel like a fit for me. I every now and again look into a client they need a lot of support. I had a big client. They were moving into a larger home. They were expanding their family. They had made a lot of money during the pandemic. And they were definitely of a more like elite status, but they were also willing to hear my argument for more sustainable furnishings and fixtures. They didn't always take those suggestions, but I did my best, and on some instances they did. And so that's just, it's how it's you do your best and you try to steer people in the right way. And every now and again I'm like, I am going to put my foot down about vinyl floors. I'm just going to tell clients from now on, no vinyl floors. I will not install vinyl, I will not specify vinyl floors. And then I will. Because I'm not an asshole. I'm not gonna just like be in the process under contract with a client and just tell them Okay, well, I wrote it in my policy. I'm sorry if you didn't read the contract, but it's no to vinyl floors and you're on your own for the flooring. Like that just doesn't feel like the right way either.
Yeah.
Part of it is like just this is our society and we all share the common responsibility and problem and I'm just doing my best. Yeah.
That's all we can do is do our best. I just have a couple more questions before we wrap this up. Well, this is the youthful older yogi. So tell me, are you 50, 51,
I'm
50,
52.
52? So how do you feel about aging? And have there been any drastic shifts in either your practice or your perception of how aging is actually now that you're living it?
Yeah, MJ, you know it. It's a
Yeah.
trick question, but yeah.
I do know it. I mean, I'm in my 60s. We're living it. It's just
Yeah.
everybody has a different response to it. My response as I keep aging is I'm going to love it because the alternative is just I don't want to be miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's actually so much to love. And I have to say, like, every now and again, when I force myself not to use the magnifier mirror,
What, what
I
did you
am
say?
exactly like when I just like let that go, what's happening is what's happening. I'm like, you know what though? I'm in such better shape emotionally and in some ways physically than I have ever been. I can't do the advanced poses anymore, and but I knew going into it because I had older teachers. They were talking about it, which I'm grateful for, that like you do give up a pose every once in a while. There's going to be a pose you no longer will do. And I mean, honestly, that happened more quickly for me. I ended up injuring myself quite a bit teaching. And so I just really backed off of a lot of some more stretchy poses and focused more on strengthening. And the main thing I think is like I've learned like to listen even more deeply to my body, which I thought, especially considering I'm a meditator, I thought I was pretty good at that. I did. And it turned out I could listen more carefully. So I am working on
Yeah.
that.
Well, the way we listen in our 20s changes when we're 30, changes when we're 40, changes when we're 50. It just keeps changing the way we listen. So I think it's very yes. And in yoga class you hear so often, listen to your body. And I'm like, well, my body's going, give me some more, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like my body's saying, slow down. Wait a second.
Yeah.
But it's all good stuff. And I think you're right, focusing more on strength now than the flexibility as we lean into our later years and make sure we have a stronger core and balance, and all of that is so important.
It truly is. It's an adjustment letting go of some of deep stretch. I'm just sort of saying this out loud because I think I'm still processing it. I got so used to feeling in the deep stretch and like luxuriating in it.
Mhm.
And someone once said, a friend who was a yoga teacher, she was extremely flexible, hypermobility. And she would say things just like off the cuff, like I could use a little stiffness. I was like, oh, like that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of I'm holding that now, like, oh yeah, my body actually benefits from a little stiffness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a grieving process. It's like letting go of the body that you used to have and thinking, oh my God, I can do this and do that. And just becoming more just settled with it. But it's a grieving process. Like I can't demonstrate a lot. I can teach it. I can't demonstrate it though. So unless it's a different version or a modification. And that's also something that, I don't struggle with. It's just you just never stop learning. And that's what I love about the
Yeah.
yoga practice. It's your lifelong learner. So
So true.
yeah.
So
Okay. Right now, what's your favorite yoga pose?
Oh, a Warrior One.
Oh,
I know, but again, it's like there's one of these like slightly awkward poses, but I'm getting the psoas to open up. Like for me lately, the last several years, psoas has become so important. And I think it relates to my shoulder issues and, things in my shoulder. So Warrior One every day, and lunges, also lunges.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Warrior One's a very complicated pose. It's very asymmetrical and it's a very complicated pose. So you're the first one that says, usually people say half moon or something very open and expansive. So, which Warrior One is too, but it's a strong, very asymmetrical. I love that. Okay, and the last question is, I ask this of all my guests, and typically the question would be formed like, oh, knowing all that you know and through all your life experiences, what would you tell your younger self? But I like to shift that around and ask you, knowing everything that you've experienced in your life and been through and absorbed, what would you tell your older self?
Oh God.
I know.
That lovely. It's like you learn these lessons. You learn them, and a lot of the lessons I've learned over and over again. Like if there's something this is gonna sound maybe a little weird, but like you were right. You were right to go to the monastery. You were right to learn yoga. You were right to study poetry. Your choices were the right choices. And they brought you here into this incredible moment. Your life is amazing. Yeah, I think something like that. Like,
Love it. You're right. You are right.
yeah.
Instead of
Yeah.
looking back and go, what the hell? Right. Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. That's so nice. So I'm going to end it here. And again, for our listeners, Eleanor's links will be on there if you are in the area and you need some home love and help. She's your girl. And I just want to thank you, Eleanor, so much for sharing your insights and your interesting journey. I think it's just remarkable. I'm so glad we reconnected. And again, thank you so much for being on the Youthful Older Yogi.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
All right, take care. Thanks so much for listening. You can find me and subscribe for more youthful and healthy information on my website, shareyogawithmj.offeringtree.com. Or if you know how to navigate social media, find me on Facebook /Mary Jane Waddell. That's Jane with a Y, Jayne. And Instagram @Mary Jane Waddell. Remember, Jane with a Y. Now, this podcast would not be possible without my youthful older producer, editor, and creative friend, Andrea Canny. And you can find Andrea at Andrea Canny, that's CANNY.com. And of course, thanks to my generous guests who've shared their time and youthful wisdom. Remember, the Youthful Older Yogi podcast is presented solely for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. It's not intended as a substitute for a physician or other qualified professionals. Okay, yogis, stay well and stay youthful.